Welcome to our 8th podcast of Reaching Minds Thoughts for Our Life Journey podcast. In today's podcast, I am joined by the lovely Sandrine Giacobino as my guest. In this podcast, we will be sharing and exploring the magic of yoga and how it can bring us self-compassion and help us being more in the present and accepting of ourselves and others, amongst other benefits. Now, I came across Sandrine when I attended a yoga class some time ago, and it wasn't very long before I realized that Sandrine was a pretty special teacher who brought so much more into the class than just her yoga practice. Her reading of her poetry and phrases not only resonated with me and with others in her class, it also made me connect with being present whilst having the yoga class. Sandrine, before we begin our conversation, which I'm really excited by, I would love for you to share one of your poems that has meant a lot to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nita. So I've chosen a poem from the Tao Te Ching. What other reasons could there be? Life is always too short. We will never be able to see everything we wanted to see, do all the things we wanted to do, or achieve all the successes we thought so important. But to arrive at a quiet mind and a serene spirit is the supreme accomplishment. If we do this, we have done all. Do what you can each day. Enjoy your goals and plans. But the cultivation of your spirit is your greatest task. What other reason could there be for the life you've been given?
Beautiful. I love the word, the spirit of what you've been given. That really touched my heart, because I just think, yeah, what is it that brings us joy every day in our lives rather than focusing on, the future or the other areas of our life which might not be graspable for us, really. But being in the present. Beautiful. Before we move into the questions and explore yoga and massage and the benefits to that, I just want to give a mini history of how Sandrine has arrived where she has, which I'm sure I won't be doing justice to it. However, you can read on her website and indeed in the show notes that I will be posting. Sandrine has had a portfolio career. She started her career in communication in the film industry. And as a part of that, she wanted to be a runner. However, what she found was that she wasn't quite satisfied being within the film industry. So she decided to take herself off to India and study massage. And as we say, the rest is history. Sandrine has been doing yoga for the last since 2001. And as she has told me, she fell in love with it. 2 years later, she completed the Savananda's teacher training, and teaching for a few months. She was on her way to Mysore to study at the Ashtanga Yoga and Meditation. That was just the beginning. Since then, Sandrine has been involved in different kinds of tradition, healing practices, spiritual approaches, yoga with different teachers. Not only that, she has traveled globally in Thailand, Bali, South Africa, Costa Rica, Mexico, where Sandrine has taught more and more yin classes, where she finds that the real essence of yoga is a slow, passive practice that allows us to dive into the silence and stillness where everything comes from, allowing us to connect to what we truly are. Sandrine, I hope I've done some justice to your background in terms of what you bring. Now, where I'm curious is, tell me what inspired you to leave the sort of film industry and get into doing yoga and massage?
So when I came to London, I was intending to work within the film industry. And after trying different jobs, perfecting my English, I had heard of yoga. I was always very active. When I was a child, I was pushed into many competitions from skiing to running to gymnastic. And I think I was living in London, enjoying myself. And I think what really was the catalyst of that is when my father passed away in 99. And before that, I had dealt with my own issues. And a lot of them were around actually body image and my relationship to food. And that death as well, just I think, pushed me a little bit more to the edge without realizing that it was that. So 6 months after my father passing, I went to India. At the time, I was interested in trying yoga, but I was traveling with someone for a short time and she was not into that. So I came back to the UK and I started studying massage, which I've always wanted to do, but the French system is a bit more strict. So I couldn't get into it here. I think in the UK, we have opportunities to do so many courses. And then I got a job that put me in a fitness center and I was having access to yoga. And I went out of curiosity and I fell in love with it, truly. I remember my first class. At the time, I was training a lot. I was running sometimes 2 hours a day. I was in the gym. And I remember that forward bend when she was gently pushing me into it and I was shaking. I was like, oh my God, what is going on? But what I remember is I remember the name of that first teacher. Her name was Laura. And it was in a room on the top of a fitness. And it was the Shavasana at the end when you rest. And I
Yes.
think I felt a sense of being at home in my body in a different way than I've been before. I think before it was through pushing, trying to achieve a certain result. And I think that time is what really intrigued me. And then from there, I started studying different form of yoga. And before I knew it, I was doing yoga every day, different styles. But I think many people I've seen in general, we come to yoga because there is a form of suffering. We're looking for an answer. Maybe we don't know exactly what we're looking for, but I think for me now, it's really, I think now I've just turned 50. It's coming together that it was the catalyst for that to find a sense of what we call in Buddhism refuge.
Yes. Yes.
And over the years, like my yoga practice has really definitely changed because when I started, it was with the Shivananda. But then very shortly at that time, I was introduced to Yin Yoga. And I resisted Yin Yoga because it meant being
Oh,
still.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was
Well,
really into Ashtanga as well.
which
So
is quite vigorous, isn't it? It's
very
sort of all
vigorous.
about, it's
And it's a
quite
theory and
rigid.
it really fitted my state of mind as well.
Yes.
And at the
Yeah.
same time, reinforce, I would say, some patterns. So for me, yin was something that it's not really what I want to get into. And it's only after a few years, because of Ashtanga, actually, I got really unwell and I had to change my practice, start exploring slower but still dynamic style. And I started introducing more and more yin. And but I would say the catalyst was suddenly a deep longing to maybe come back home to something that I felt I lost.
Wow. Wow. And in that process of discovering or beginning to discover what you've lost, what did you find? I'm curious about that.
So with that first experience of Shavasana, resting, being still, there was a sense of being safe, being held. And then, of course, it's been a journey. Then there were times when I would use yoga to numb myself, especially when I was practicing and pushing myself so much with the Ashtanga practice. Yeah. So what was the question already? Is what I've
What you discovered about yourself, really, what you were.
So I think when you study as well yoga, so when I did my first training, truly it was not to become a yoga teacher. I really fell for this practice. I was like, I have to study more. So for me, it was for my own interest. And then obviously when you study, you realize that the asanas, what we know the most in the West, and the pranayama is one aspect of yoga. that ultimately it's about meditation. So I
Mm.
think I started realizing that I'm more than this body, which I've not had a good relationship with for a very long time. And then obviously that took me into the extreme of, okay, so if I'm not his body, who cares about the body? So it's been, as I say, it's been a journey of
Yes.
waving the different learning. It was that knowing that I'm more than his body. I'm not his body. And now what I want to say is without his body, I can't know that I'm not his body, but that I'm much more than that.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds so deep. Actually, I'm just gonna think, how do I unpack it? And what kind of comes over for me is something that you said a few minutes ago, that doing a yoga practice can also be an avoidance as well of oneself.
For me, it was definitely. I'm not saying it's
Yes.
the case for everyone, but it was. There was a time when I was pushing my body so much. I was doing
Okay.
Ashtanga is a very demanding practice. So when I
Yes.
went to India, I started practicing twice a day because I had the time. And then for many years, and I really see what it is now by peeling the layers. It was a form of controlling, avoiding feeling a certain anxiety. I think I have quite an anxious nature, just naturally.
I
That's what
love
I
your honesty. I love
yeah,
your
no, no,
honesty.
but you have, I think spirituality is about being honest anyway. Doing two practices a day of such an intense practice and adding other thing was a way of avoiding until in 2005, 6, I started getting really unwell. And I'm not necessarily the kind of person that goes to the doctor, but at that time I did. And blood tests were just revealing there was a sort of inflammation, nothing really dramatic. But I had to stop the Ashtanga, move to a different form of yoga, and then the rashes I would experience would disappear. I would go back to Ashtanga, it was too much heat in the body. So I had to let go of that practice, start moving into different form of practices and introducing more and more yin.
Mm.
And of course, yin was very uncomfortable at times to hold the poses, not so much physically, but more the emotional aspect of it.
So where I'm curious is quite interesting that because someone who practices yin yoga is probably one of my favorites is when you're holding the poses, what was going through your mind as you were holding them? Because that is one of the big differences between other forms of yoga. So I'm curious, and I'll share
So
you a
I,
little bit what goes through my mind, really.
yeah. So I guess at the beginning, there was still, I think yoga is a journey that starts with the outer, the body, to eventually turns in. So I
Yes.
think for a long time, and that's why I share in my classes very often, is I was still maybe obsessed too much by the form that I had to go the deepest in the shape I was in. And now it's for me, at least now after, my God, I've been practicing yin yoga for 22 years to some extent. It's about, okay, what is arising for me? What am I feeling? Because when we're constantly in movement and we very often carry his body like machines, they on automatic ways, we don't have time to feel, to sense. So it's a way of checking in with myself and to know as well that it's a good counterbalance because I'm quite active on the side still.
Mm.
So now I'm more into observing. Sometimes I observe the mind is very busy, but I observe it. And by observing that, it goes away.
Mm.
Some days the practice is more physical. Maybe I've been doing a lot of swimming, let's say the day before, and I'm a bit stiffer, and I just observe the layers peeling away. So the practice is one of being reflective.
And how do you teach that in your own classes of about observing ourselves, our own bodies, how we're holding ourselves? How can you teach that to people who might be more in their heads?
Yeah, it's not easy because we hear it in any yoga class. Listen to your body. And then even myself as a body worker, as a yoga teacher, and some of the modalities I have, the invitation is to tap into the body, but very often we don't know. We live from the neck up in our head.
Yeah.
So the invitation is to maybe tell students you might feel a certain maybe tension, a targeted area. So you try to direct the person into that part of the body to remind them to stay with what they sense and also what they feel, because as we stop, more things are going to come up. We're going to be able to really check in with ourselves where we are these days. Like we live very busy lives these days, and people have jobs and responsibility towards their families, their kids, their partners, and so on. And we don't really take the time to do that. So the invitation is really to stop and to be with what arises. And again, these pointers, where in the body do you feel that? And if it's an emotion as well, where is that emotion in the body? Because our bodies are that accumulation of the different stories we went through.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I guess in your teaching as a yin yoga teacher, it's about making that available to your class. And I'm sure all of us, the 25 of us, are all on our own little journey. And I guess where I'm curious is when you're observing, if you're probably, when you're observing other people, what are you noticing maybe as some of the benefits that people have from the yin yoga class, do you think?
It's sometimes you teach and people leave the room and they say thank you, whatever. But sometimes you have people coming to you and sharing stories, and you're like, wow, because once you've done something for a long time, it's part of your life. And it's a bit like with everything, maybe you're going to plateau and then something else happens, you move on. So I've heard many stories, people telling me that it supported them when they were going through a divorce, to be with what they were feeling and to calm the mind, to approach things differently. Some people experience deep release. So sometimes that can manifest as more space in the body, sometimes as an emotional release, tears, laughter, shaking. So you have, I don't know, so many responses. Some just really realize how busy the mind is, and suddenly they experience for the first time, even if it's a little gap, a gap of silence, of stillness, and realizing, wow, I'm much more than my thoughts, my worries, my anxieties. Many benefits that over the years I've heard about. And some people actually, for the first time, really connecting or reconnecting with their bodies because maybe they've gone through a form of disconnection from the body.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to hear these different benefits that a practice can have.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I love doing yin yoga is because it enables you to hold the pose for a longer. And through that, I probably start with I've got to get it right, or I've got to hold it in this way, or and then once I lean into it, I can, and if I'm aware of it in myself, I can see the flow that occurs through that and how I can feel quite relaxed with that pose. And I think I'm slowly through the yoga letting go. I don't think I'm quite there yet. I think I'm
I think
still
it's a
trying to get it
journey.
right. Still trying to make sure that I'm doing it right. However, I think both yin and restorative yoga enables me to slow down. Although I think I'm quite good at connecting with my body holistically, I still think I live in my head quite a bit. So, in terms of you've been doing this for 20 odd years, and I can hear the richness, both in terms of your own personal journey of using this or being embroiled in the yoga as a part of your own healing process, I
Completely.
think. And what kind of continues to bring you joy to do this work?
I think it's again the feedback of students. And I think as well, I've always said that I think there is a saying, I can't remember exactly the whole, I think there are three sentences, but we teach what we need to learn ourselves.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I want to be very clear that very often I teach, not to say always what I need to learn and practice myself. So I think that's why I'm still teaching. It really gives me something when I see people coming a certain way and living the space differently, whether they have a smile or they look more relaxed. So I think that's what keeps on. Yeah, it's just the feedback of the
Yes.
students and how it affects their life and how maybe, as you say, like I love sharing poems and maybe inspirational quotes, but how something very often resonates. Sometimes I have a student saying, "Oh my God, I felt the class was just for me," or "You were reading my mind."
Actually, that absolutely. I would say
Yes.
sometimes for me, when I walk away from that class and I'm sharing it with friends, I picked up okay, wasn't it a fantastic poem? Okay. For others, it didn't quite land in that way. However, I think it lands in different ways for different people in what you share. So I certainly think we're all coming at it from different places and we're taking maybe different things from it based on where we are in our own journey in this relationship with our body. I think for me, what I'm taking away from our session, that we are more than our bodies. We are it's our body, it's our mind, and yoga isn't just about perfecting the pose and so forth. It's about, I think the word that comes to my mind is kindness with our own body. Because I think we're not very kind to our body much of the time. I think we take it for granted that
Yeah,
it's,
very often we do until something goes wrong. And that's
yes,
how, as well, how some come to the practice. They're trying to fix. And then
yes,
the practice, as you say, is going to affect us differently. And it's wonderful. Some of us would just keep the practice for the physical practice, but whether we want it or not, so I think something is working underneath. I remember
yeah,
reading very early when I started yoga that when you start yoga, you never walk on the earth the same way because there is an awareness that is cultivated. And you start bringing that awareness in everything. And his bodies are, first of all, they're impermanent. They are wonderful instrument. And that's the longest relationship we're going to have is with ourselves. So we might as well learn, whatever age it is, to start taking care of them. Yes.
yeah. And I love that actually. I love you saying the longest relationship we have is with ourselves. I love that because I think that is so powerful. And I wonder how many of us actually think about things in that way, that our longest relationship is with ourselves rather than with others. What would be your kind of couple of tips you could give to novices who are listening to this podcast?
So what I would say is we live in a time where more is better, faster is sexier, whatever. Yeah. So if anyone listening has a yin practice, for example, or is interested in learning yin, that they pick up a pose and that we hold it maybe 3, 5 minutes. Everyone is busy, but I'm sure we all have 3, 5 minutes. So it's better, and I took that from a friend a long time ago. It's better to do a little, a lot than a lot, a little. So to start with stopping, taking a few deep breaths. I like lying down, feet on the floor, knees up into constructive rest, maybe placing the hands on a part of the body where we can feel some movement. So we connect as well with our breath, which is key. Yeah, in
Mm,
everything we do. Then maybe to choose a pose that could be combining the element of meditation, being with what is, and at the same time practicing a pose and observing what is during that time. And then if you have access to a garden or a park, we're lucky in London to have that, to spend some time barefoot. I do that every day in the grass to connect and to
that's an
maybe start
amazing
with,
experience.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. To touch the earth with your
Yes.
feet and the grass it is a lovely experience. I
And to
completely,
remember that we are the elements, so we are this earth as well.
we are this element. So, wow, a couple of amazing tips. Befriending your body and know that you are the element of the earth as well. Those are wonderful things. Thank you so much, Sandrine. This has been such a rich and wonderful experience. And I know that people can get access to you via your website, which we will have on the show notes. And I'm really grateful that I came across you and that I continue to learn from your philosophy and your teaching of this holistic yoga.
Thank you, Nida. Really, it was a real honor to be invited and a real pleasure to share with you. And I hope some will be inspired to start on their journey, whether it's 5 minutes a day or an hour a day. Thank you.
I'm sure people will be.